Right. So get ready. We're about to do a deep dive into a career that I'm sure many of our listeners are curious about, electrical equipment assemblers.
Hmm.
And, when we talk about electrical equipment, we're thinking circuits, systems, maybe some of you
Yeah.
even tinkered with DIY kits as a kid.
Right.
But we're talking about the real deal here. We've got RoleCatcher's Career Guide for Electrical Equipment Assemblers. And I got to say, going through it, there are some pretty shocking truths about this field.
Yeah, it really does challenge a lot of assumptions people might have about what this job is like and,
Yeah.
frankly, where it's going in the future.
Yeah, like for starters, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the robot in the factory.
Hmm.
We hear so much about automation taking over jobs, but RoleCatcher, they actually say it's a pretty stable outlook for electrical equipment assemblers. So what's up with that?
Well, it really boiled down to the complexity. Robots are great at repetitive tasks,
Right.
doing the same thing over and over in a controlled environment. But when you're talking about putting together complex electrical equipment, that often requires a level of, dexterity. You've got to be able to problem solve on the fly, think critically.
Yeah.
And those are things that even the most advanced robots have a hard time replicating.
So it's not just about, like, following a set of instructions.
Yeah.
You need to be able to think on your feet, adapt to problems. That's actually really reassuring to hear, especially if you're thinking about this as a career.
Exactly. And that need for human skill, it creates a level of job security that honestly is becoming rarer and rarer these days. And it's not just limited to electrical equipment assembly. We see this trend across a lot of the skilled trades,
Yeah.
where you need a deep understanding of how things work, and you've got to be able to use your hands. That expertise is valuable.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've established that the robots aren't taking over just yet, but what about the day-to-day, right? The
Yeah.
guide mentions repetitive tasks, and I'm not going to lie, that doesn't exactly sound like the most exciting career path.
I hear you. I get it.
What do you think?
But here's the thing. Think about the sheer range of things that count as electrical equipment. I mean, we're talking tiny circuits in your phone, right? To those massive systems that power, like, industrial plants.
Right.
Even those giant wind turbines you see, that's all electrical equipment.
Okay, so yeah, it's definitely not just screwing the same widget together all day long
Right.
with that much variety.
Yeah.
You could be working on totally different systems, using different skills, which would keep things interesting, right?
For sure. And speaking of skills, that specialism section in the guide,
Oh, yeah.
it's really eye-opening. It's not just about knowing how to use a screwdriver. You need a surprising amount of specialized knowledge in this field.
Like what?
Well, the top two they highlight are mechanical knowledge, that's 53%, and then computers and electronics at 52%.
Wow. So it's almost a 50-50 split.
Almost exactly.
That's wild. So does that mean, like, to be an electrical equipment assembler these days, you have to be this multi-skilled tech wizard, comfortable with the physical assembly and all the circuitry and stuff?
Well, it's definitely a sign of the times, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Cars are basically computers on wheels now.
Yeah,
Your refrigerator probably has a touchscreen.
it's true. It's all connected.
Exactly. And someone has to assemble it all.
Right. So we're talking about a job where you need crazy attention to detail to follow those complex instructions, but then also you need the problem-solving skills to fix things when they go wrong, which, let's be real,
Always happens.
always happens. And on top of all that, you need a solid understanding of mechanical and electronic systems. This is way more demanding than I think people realize.
It definitely challenges the stereotype, that's for sure. And that actually brings us to another interesting point the guide makes: the potential for career advancement.
Oh, okay. Now this is where things get interesting. Especially for those of you out there with ambition, the career stages section in this guide was like a gold mine of information.
It really lays it all out, a clear progression you can see. So you start at entry level, and at that stage, it's all about proving yourself. Can you follow directions? Can you be trusted with the work?
Right, the basics.
Exactly. But then you move up to junior level, and that's where things get interesting.
And by interesting, you mean?
You start troubleshooting problems. You might even get to train newcomers.
Wow, so they trust you with responsibility early on.
It's pretty remarkable, and it doesn't stop there. You keep going, you get to senior level, and now you're talking about process improvement, collaborating with engineers. You're not just a cog in the machine anymore.
You're really part of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
So you can really climb the ladder in this field. But what does that actually look like? I mean, in terms of actually getting to those higher levels, are we talking more on-the-job training? Or do you pretty much need to get more education, like go back to school for those senior level positions?
That's the big question, right? And the good news is it seems like there are multiple paths you could take. That
Okay.
guy definitely talks about certifications being valuable, especially with technology always changing, you got to keep up.
Right.
But it also stresses that you don't necessarily need a fancy degree to move up.
Okay, so you could start at an entry-level position
Yeah.
and then, I don't know, take some night classes or something while you're getting that on-the-job experience.
Hmm.
That's cool, gives you options.
Absolutely. And that ties into what we were talking about before. This field is always evolving.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe you do some workshops, keep up with the latest industry stuff. That's how you stay ahead of the game. And that could open doors to those higher level roles.
Where you're not just assembling, you're actually helping to design and improve the systems. It's a really interesting balance, because on the one hand, this is a field where, like we said, human skills are still super important.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you can't just get comfy.
that's for sure.
Technology is always pushing forward, so as an electrical equipment assembler, you got to be ready to learn and adapt constantly.
Absolutely. You've got to have that drive to keep learning, to dig deeper into the why behind the how. That's what will set you apart.
It's not just about knowing how to do the thing. You have to understand why it works the way it does.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of setting yourself apart, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about RoleCatcher itself. We've been diving deep into their career guide, which is amazing, but they also have this whole platform that helps people find jobs, prepare for interviews, all that, which seems like a pretty valuable tool for someone considering this career path.
It really shows how much technology is changing how we find jobs these days.
Right.
Think about it. You have all these resources right at your fingertips that even a few years ago wouldn't have been available.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You can research careers, fix up your resume, even practice your interview answers.
It's like having a career coach in your pocket.
Exactly. And platforms like RoleCatcher, they bring all that together.
And then they connect you with potential employers, too. I mean, that's huge.
It really streamlines the whole process, so you can focus on putting your best foot forward.
And find companies that actually match what you're looking for.
Exactly.
So far, it sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
But there's always another side to these things, right? Like, how do these platforms affect the companies doing the hiring? Could it actually make things more competitive for job seekers?
That's a really important question, and it's something to think about because even though these platforms have a ton of benefits,
Yeah.
both for the people looking for jobs and the companies hiring,
Right.
it does make you wonder how technology is changing the whole landscape of work.
So what do you mean? Like, what kind of impact are we talking about?
Well, for employers, it definitely makes hiring more efficient. It's easier to find qualified people.
Right.
But is there a risk of it becoming too simplified? Like, could companies overlook someone who might be a great fit just because their resume doesn't have the exact keywords the algorithm is looking for?
That's a good point.
And then on the job seeker side, yeah, having these tools is great,
Sure.
but everyone else has them too.
It's true.
You're not just competing with other people anymore. You're competing with their digitally enhanced profiles, their perfectly worded answers.
Like a digital arms race?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more important than ever to focus on the things that make you stand out as a person.
Like what?
Things an algorithm can't measure, you know?
Yeah.
Your problem-solving skills, how adaptable you are, your passion for the
Yeah.
work.
Right, the human stuff.
Exactly, you can't fake that.
So it's all about finding that balance, right?
Absolutely.
Using the technology to your advantage,
Yes.
but also remembering to show off those uniquely human qualities that employers are looking for.
You got it.
It's really amazing how much this field is changing and growing. And it makes you wonder, like, what does it even mean to be an electrical equipment assembler 5-10 years down the road?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, the guide doesn't come with a crystal ball. But we can look at the trends, right? And what we're seeing now is this merging of, like, mechanical engineering, electrical, computer science.
Right, like we were talking about before, cars are basically computers now.
Exactly. And it's only going to get more complex.
So what, are we all going to be driving around in spaceships soon?
Well, maybe not spaceships, but imagine needing people who can assemble quantum computers.
Whoa.
Or, like, build those massive offshore wind farms.
Okay, yeah, those are some pretty specialized skills.
Right. So the demand for people who can handle that kind of complexity, I think it's only going to go up.
That's pretty exciting. But it also makes you think, like, if we're talking about building things that are so high-tech,
Yeah.
could those things eventually, like, build themselves?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, you've got self-driving cars already.
It's true.
3D printing is getting more and more advanced. So yeah, it's something to consider.
So where does that leave someone who's interested in this field? It feels like a really interesting time, but also kind of uncertain.
I think that's a good way to put it, but that's the thing about technology, right? It's always changing.
Right.
So the most important thing is to be prepared to change with it.
So all those skills we were talking about,
Yeah,
being adaptable, problem solver, being willing to keep learning,
exactly.
those are the things that will always be valuable no matter what crazy new tech comes along.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we might not know exactly what the future holds for electrical equipment assemblers,
Yeah,
but it's definitely an exciting field to be a part of.
I agree. And who knows, maybe some of our listeners will be the ones shaping that future.
Now that's a thought. Well, on that note, we're going to have to wrap things up. But to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you learned something new about the world of electrical equipment assembly, and maybe even got a little inspired to tinker with some circuits of your own. Until next time, keep those circuits humming.